Welcome to TVP World with me, Jan Darasz. We have a special interview today that's been recorded shortly ahead of the 80th anniversary commemorations of the liberation of the Auschwitz Birkenau camp in 1945. My guest today is the director of the museum here at Auschwitz Birkenau, Dr. Piotr Cywiński. Welcome to the program. Thank you for taking the time.
It's our role and our duty.
What are going to be the chief characteristics, the chief character, the mood of these special commemorations that you have planned?
It's the 80th anniversary of this liberation. That means that the survivors that will be with us disappear. I remember 20 years ago, there were 1,500 on such a ceremony. 10 years ago, there were 300. We expect 55, perhaps 60 persons this year. They are very old, and I don't want to exaggerate, but probably it's the last round anniversary with still an important group of them, so it will be certainly focused on them, on their history.
They'll be center stage.
Yeah. They will be those who will deliver the main speeches, and we really want to be once again with them.
How many people in total do you expect?
We built an enormous whole tent for something like 3,000 people inside, but there's also an open sector for the others, but I think that the majority will follow that on the TV, in the media, in the internet, of course.
Yes. You mentioned that the passage of time affects us all, it affects the Holocaust survivors. How does that affect the education that the museum has to offer, has to provide, as memory goes into folk memory, goes into history, goes into past history?
I remember times where the half of groups who were coming here were accompanied by a survivor. It was, 20 years ago perhaps. It does not happen anymore now. Here we are working with remembrance, so it's a little bit different than the work done in the schools when they are working with historical knowledge. Remembrance and historical knowledge is not exactly the same. Yes. But I think that the situation in Europe, at least, is certainly better than it was in the early 90s or something like this, when all this learning on the Holocaust were just arriving to the schools, to the curricula, to the programs. Now we have nearly the second generation of people who already got that in the books, in the schools. So the basic knowledge is, at least in Europe, quite good. In the other part of the world, it depends on the systems of education, mainly.
Is the Holocaust chiefly a European phenomenon then? The world, the other side of the world may not know of it, may not care. Is it something that we, obviously we have to cherish it because it's a part of European history, but how is the Holocaust ranked, seen in the rest of the world as part of a world view?
It depends, in fact. Of course, the Holocaust was not only a part of the European history, but I think a fundamental part for the understanding of the after-war time in Europe, and all those efforts to try to build and to preserve a different world. In some countries, like Rwanda, like Armenia, like Cambodia, yes. Of course there are some people who try to compare, to understand perhaps better the methods of the education, looking on what we are doing here in Europe. But in general, in many parts of the world, the understanding of this particular genocide as something that never happened before, and even after it's difficult to be compared, is very present, at least with the people that I am in touch with. I remember a man from southern Korea was coming a long time ago to visit here, and I asked him, why do you want to, you have 5 days to spend in Europe, why do you wanted really to come to see Auschwitz? And he answered me very shortly, every time I wanted to understand Europe.
Yes, it's the key 20th century to understanding the entire century and even now, isn't it?
In Europe at least, or in Israel, or in Northern America, you can't really understand the tasks, the problems, the reality after the war if you don't focus on this tragedy.
What about how do you educate young generations better? What are the instruments you use to educate the youth of today about the Holocaust? Is it best via the popular culture, or is the work of the historian like yourself, is that the primary way of getting the historical fact rather than the mythology around the Holocaust?
First of all, for us, the first tool is the authenticity of the terrain, of the area of the camp, that you can go through, you can see, you can touch. And of course, the authenticity of the words of the survivors, all those testimonies, memoirs that they give us. And I think that if you want to, understand a little bit more, you have to go through. You have to take your time for a deep visit in Auschwitz. Of course, it's not very easy. It's sometimes really painful. It's not for everybody, let's say, understandable in some aspects. That's why we are using 20 or 21 languages with our guides. I think it's absolutely necessary to speak to young people in their own language, because already the topic is difficult. We can't create some new barriers. We are trying to develop, of course, our presence outside of Auschwitz with some exhibitions that are going around the world, with some possibility to visit online with the authentic guide. You can ask him questions, you can enter in discussion with him, with our presence in the social media and in some other ways. But the relation with the schools are extremely important. If a teacher prepare his class to this visit, the visit will be certainly better.
What in your words are the chief misuses of history about the Holocaust?
There are still, of course, some old-fashioned deniers or people who try to diminishing some victims or changing the numbers. But in my opinion, there are some new phenomena. All those books, fiction books, who are speaking about Auschwitz. They have every time Auschwitz in the middle of their title. It every time said that it was after some very, very long, let's say, studies on documents and on literatures. We never saw any one of these authors. It's a pure fiction, and I think because it's published in millions of examples and many languages, at the end it can change a little bit our perception or imagination about what Auschwitz really was.
You as a historian are you fighting a losing battle with this sort of interpretation, this fictionalized view of Auschwitz?
Losing battle is perhaps a little bit too early to say that. We try to explain to the large public that yes, you can do fictions. You have the right to publish fictions, but you are obliged to say that it is fiction. If somebody uses some books of fiction in order to find some truth about Auschwitz, it's a little bit like if he would like to have some truth about astronomy on the basis of Star Wars.
Yes, that's a great analogy. Final question to you, Dr. Cywiński. When I was going around, or when the team here was going around the camp today, a lot of renovation work going on.
We prefer, say, conservation.
Conservation work. How do you conserve what's the philosophy? When a piece of wood that's 80 years old decays, what do you replace it with? And how do you...
First of all, we try to not replace. We try to fight as long as it is possible to save the original. If you have to replace something, for technical reasons, for example, in a wooden barrack, we need to replace some elements of the structures in order to save the barracks. In this situation, we try to replace with the same type of wood and in a very visible way, that people can really, in an easy way, understand what is original and what is not. It's an enormous story, this conservation here in Auschwitz. 200 hectares, 155 buildings, 300 ruins, documents, objects. It's a never-ending story.
Yes, and they're being found in people's cellars, in people's attics, or material is coming into you all the time, I presume.
Of course, it's something, even archaeology give us some new objects, so it's a really never-ending story.
Dr. Cywiński, thank you very much for coming onto the programme and doing the interview and giving your valuable time.
Thank you.
That's all we have time for today at TVP World.